The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Miguel Reyes pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the 14th floor at Westfield Corporate Plaza. It was just past 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, and most of the suits had gone home for the day. A few offices still glowed with desk lamps, where ambitious executives hunched over spreadsheets or practiced presentations. Miguel knew their routines better than they did. He knocked softly on the half-open door of Suite 1422. "Excuse me, sir. Just need to empty your trash." The man at the desk barely looked up, just waved a hand without breaking his focus on the computer screen. Miguel had cleaned his office for 3 years and couldn't remember if the man had ever actually looked at his face. It didn't bother Miguel much anymore. After 15 years of working nights at Westfield, he'd grown used to being invisible. He moved quietly, collecting paper waste from the bin and wiping down surfaces with practiced efficiency. The executives came and went, some lasted months, others years, but Miguel remained, watching the rhythms of corporate success and failure from the shadows. He glanced at the family photo on the executive's desk, a smiling wife, 2 children on a beach somewhere tropical. Miguel's own family photo stayed in his wallet, too precious to risk leaving anywhere. Just him and Sophia, taken 2 years ago at her high school music recital. His beautiful, talented daughter clutching her certificate, beaming with the kind of joy that made all his sacrifices worthwhile. As Miguel wheeled his cart back into the hallway, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He waited until he reached the janitor's closet to check it, finding a message from Sophia with an attachment. His fingers, rough from years of cleaning chemicals, fumbled slightly as he opened it. "Dad, my official acceptance letter from Juilliard. Can you believe it?" Pride swelled in his chest like a physical thing. His Sophia, accepted to one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. He quickly texted back, "Mi tesoro. So proud, we'll celebrate tonight." His eyes lingered on the screen, rereading her message. What he didn't type was the worry that had been growing inside him since she first auditioned. The letter mentioned a partial scholarship, covering about 60% of the astronomical tuition. Even with his second weekend job at the grocery store, the remaining amount seemed impossible. Miguel returned to his cart, moving down the hall to the next office. As he worked, his mind calculated and recalculated numbers that never added up to enough. He'd been saving since Sophia was little, knowing her talent would take her places. But New York City? Juilliard? Those dreams required more than a janitor's salary. "Hey, Miguel." He looked up to see Diane from HR walking toward him. Unlike most employees, she always acknowledged the cleaning staff, knew them by name. "Big event coming up, huh?" she said, stopping by his cart. "Event?" "The annual company gala. This Friday at the Grand Ballroom downtown. It's the 20th anniversary of Westfield's founding, so they're making it extra fancy this year." "Ah," Miguel nodded. "Yes, very busy night for cleaning afterward." Diane frowned slightly. "You know, the staff should get to enjoy these things too sometimes, not just clean up after them." Miguel smiled politely. They both knew that wasn't how things worked. The cleaning crew wasn't invisible enough to blend in at formal company gatherings, but was invisible enough to be forgotten when invitations went out. "My daughter got into Juilliard," he said, changing the subject. "For piano, Miguel." "That's amazing. You must be so proud. Very proud." His smile was genuine now. "She works very hard, practices many hours every day." "She must get her discipline from her father," Diane said warmly. Miguel shrugged, embarrassed by the compliment. "She gets her talent from her mother." A brief shadow crossed his face, as it always did when he mentioned Rosa. 8 years gone now, taken by cancer when Sophia was just 10. His beautiful wife, who once drew crowds in Mexico City with her playing. "Well, congratulations to Sophia," Diane said. "That's wonderful news." After she walked away, Miguel continued his rounds with a slightly lighter step. Sharing good news made it feel more real. Sophia was going to Juilliard. Somehow, he would make it happen. 3 hours later, Miguel clocked out and hurried to catch the 10:45 bus. His apartment was a 40-minute ride across town, but tonight he wasn't heading home. Instead, he got off near the community center where he'd arranged to meet Sophia. The building was mostly dark, except for a few windows. Miguel entered using the side door where the night security guard Hector nodded in recognition. "Your girl's already here," Hector said. "Been playing for about an hour." "Thanks," Miguel replied. slipping him the usual $5 for letting them use the space after hours. Miguel followed the familiar sound of piano music down the empty hallway. The community center's old Steinway had seen better days, but it was still far superior to the second-hand upright they had at home in their small apartment. The director let Sophia practice here when the space wasn't being used, knowing her talent and circumstances. He paused outside the door, listening. Chopin's Ballad No. 1. The challenging piece flowed from his daughter's fingers with an emotional depth that always amazed him. Sophia played with technical precision, yes, but it was the feeling she conveyed that made her special. Each note carried the weight of story, of life lived. Miguel quietly opened the door. Sophia was so absorbed in the music she didn't notice him. Her dark hair fell forward as she leaned into a particularly passionate section, her slender fingers dancing across the keys with confidence and grace. At 17, she looked so much like her mother it sometimes hurt to watch her. When the final notes faded, Miguel applauded softly. Sophia spun around on the bench, her serious expression breaking into a wide smile. "Dad, how long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to know Juilliard is lucky to get you," he said, crossing the room to hug her. She laughed, hugging him back fiercely. "I still can't believe it. I keep reading the letter to make sure it's real." "It's real, mi tesoro. You earned it." Sophia moved over on the bench, making room for him. "Play something with me? Like we used to?" Miguel hesitated, looking down at his hands. Rough, calloused, the nails cut short and practical. "Not a musician's hands anymore, please?" she asked. "For good luck?" He couldn't deny her, not tonight. He sat beside her, placing his workman's hands on the keys next to her elegant ones. Together they began the duet they'd played since she was small, a traditional Mexican folk song that Rosa had arranged for 4 hands. At first, Miguel played stiffly, his fingers remembering the motions but lacking fluidity. But as the familiar melody surrounded them, something loosened in him. Note by note, measure by measure, the music reclaimed him. His hands remembered their old purpose, and for a few minutes, he wasn't the invisible janitor but the musician he'd once been. When they finished, Sophia rested her head on his shoulder. "We should celebrate. Maybe go to that diner you like on Saturday?" Miguel nodded, not trusting his voice just yet. He wanted to tell her they should be celebrating at the finest restaurant in town, that her achievement deserved champagne and flowers and everything beautiful. Instead, they would go to the place where the waitresses knew them and occasionally slipped them extra fries. "Dad?" Sophia's voice grew serious. "I've been thinking about the money." "Don't worry about that," he said quickly. "We will find a way. But the scholarship only covers..." "Sophia." He turned to face her fully. "This is your dream. We will make it happen. Trust me." She studied his face, wanting to believe him. "I could defer for a year, work and save up." "No," he said firmly. "No delays. When opportunity comes, you must grab it with both hands." Miguel had said the same words to himself once, long ago, when offered a chance to study at a prestigious conservatory in Europe. But then he'd met Rosa, fallen in love, and chosen a different path. He'd never regretted choosing family over career, but he wouldn't let Sophia face the same choice. "Let me worry about the money," he continued. "You focus on being ready for Juilliard." Sophia nodded reluctantly. "I applied for every scholarship I could find. Maybe more will come through, see? Already solving problems." He stood up, checking his watch. "It's late. You have school tomorrow." As they gathered their things to leave, Sophia asked, "Will you come to my recital next week? I know it's during your shift, but Ms. Abernathy is letting me play the Rachmaninoff, and I've been working so hard on it." Miguel hesitated. Missing work meant missing pay, and every dollar counted now, but the hopeful look in his daughter's eyes made the decision for him. "I will be there," he promised. Front row. Outside, the night was cool as they walked to the bus stop. Sophia chatted excitedly about her upcoming recital, about New York City, about all the possibilities suddenly opening before her. Miguel listened, nodding and smiling at all the right moments. His mind, however, was already calculating which bill payments he could delay, what expenses could be cut, what additional work he might find. The math still didn't add up, but he refused to let that dim the light in his daughter's eyes. As they waited for the bus, Sophia suddenly asked, "Do you ever miss it? Playing, I mean. Really playing, not just with me." Miguel looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I hear you play and I think perhaps this is better. My music continuing through you. The bus appeared around the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Miguel put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility and love. Besides, he added with a small smile, who would want to hear an old janitor play when they could listen to the next great Juilliard pianist instead? The community center buzzed with activity as parents and friends filed in for the spring recital. Miguel slipped through the side entrance, still wearing his work uniform. He'd managed to convince his supervisor to let him take a 2-hour break, promising to stay late to finish his cleaning duties. The compromise meant he wouldn't miss Sophia's performance, but would be working until well past midnight. He found a seat in the back row, feeling out of place among the well-dressed families. A printed program sat on each chair, and Miguel picked his up with a surge of pride when he saw Sophia's name listed for the final performance of the evening, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, First Movement. The first few students played their pieces with varying degrees of skill. Some stumbled through simple compositions, while others showed real promise. Miguel applauded politely for each one, remembering Sophia at that age, how her small fingers had stretched to reach the keys, how she'd practice until her hands ached. An older woman settled into the empty seat beside him during a break between performances. Miguel recognized her as Ms. Abernathy, Sophia's piano teacher for the past 8 years. "You made it," she whispered with a smile. "Sophia was worried your boss wouldn't let you off." "I would not miss it," Miguel replied simply. "Not for anything." Ms. Abernathy nodded, her eyes kind. "She's something special, Miguel. In 30 years of teaching, I've rarely seen such natural talent combined with such dedication. She gets both from her mother," he said softly. "And your modesty," Ms. Abernathy added. "Sophia told me you were quite accomplished yourself." Miguel shrugged uncomfortably. That was another life. Before she could respond, the next student began playing and they fell silent. Miguel was grateful for the interruption. He rarely spoke about his past as a musician, especially with people who might recognize the names of his teachers or the competitions he'd won in Mexico. That part of his life had ended when Rosa got sick, when the choice became either pursuing his career or being there for his family. It hadn't felt like a sacrifice then, just the only possible decision. The recital continued, each performance bringing Sophia's turn closer. Miguel checked his watch, calculating how much of his shift he was missing and what it would cost him in overtime. The numbers weren't reassuring, but he pushed them aside. Tonight wasn't about money. Finally, the second-to-last student finished, and there was a brief pause as Sophia walked onto the small stage. She wore a simple blue dress, not new, but carefully pressed. Her hair was tied back, revealing the determined set of her jaw that Miguel knew so well. She looked nervous but composed as she approached the piano, adjusting the bench with precise movements before sitting down. Sophia glanced out at the audience, searching until she found Miguel. He nodded slightly, giving her the encouragement she needed. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's concerto filled the room, dark and brooding. Even on the community center's aging piano, the power of the music was unmistakable. Sophia played with technical precision, but it was the emotion she conveyed that made people sit up straighter, that made them really listen. Miguel closed his eyes, letting the familiar notes wash over him. This piece had special meaning for their family. It was the composition Rosa had been practicing when he first met her at the conservatory in Mexico City, the music that had made him fall in love before he even saw her face. Sophia knew this story, and her interpretation carried that knowledge, the romance, the passion, the eventual heartbreak. As she reached the piece's midpoint, where the melody transforms from something melancholy to something hopeful, Miguel felt his throat tighten. She played it exactly as Rosa would have, with the same subtle shifts in tempo, the same delicate touch on certain phrases. It was like hearing Rosa's hands on the keys again, a ghost brought back through their daughter's talent. When Sophia hit the triumphant climax of the movement, her fingers flying across the keys with confident precision, Miguel wasn't the only one leaning forward in his seat. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, caught up in the story she was telling through Rachmaninoff's notes. Even the youngest children sat still, captivated. The final chords resonated through the room, hanging in the air for a long moment, before Sophia lifted her hands from the keys. There was a beat of silence, that precious second when great music has just ended, and no one wants to break the spell, and then the audience erupted into applause. Miguel was on his feet. Without realizing, he'd stood, clapping until his hands hurt. Around him, others were standing too, something that rarely happened at student recitals. Sophia's face broke into a surprised smile as she rose from the bench and bowed. Ms. Abernathy leaned toward Miguel, nearly shouting to be heard over the applause. That was extraordinary. No wonder Juilliard wants her. Miguel nodded, too emotional to speak. In that moment, watching his daughter acknowledge the standing ovation, all his worries about money seemed distant. They would find a way. Talent like hers couldn't be wasted. After the recital, he waited near the refreshment table while Sophia was surrounded by classmates and their parents. She kept glancing his way, clearly eager to hear what he thought, but understanding he'd need to leave soon to get back to work. When she finally broke free and made her way to him, Miguel pulled her into a tight hug. "Perfecto," he whispered. "Your mother would be so proud." Sophia hugged him back fiercely. "You really think so?" "I know so." He pulled back to look at her. "The way you played the middle section, it was exactly how she did it." I closed my eyes, and for a moment, Sophia's eyes glistened. "I was thinking of her the whole time, and you. How you both gave up so much." Miguel shook his head. "We gave up nothing. We gained everything." He checked his watch reluctantly. "I must go back now. Will you be okay getting home?" "Lucia's mom offered me a ride," Sophia said, nodding toward a group of parents. "But wait, Ms. Abernathy wanted to talk to you first." As if summoned by her name, the piano teacher appeared at Sophia's side. "Miguel, do you have a moment? It's important." He glanced at his watch again. "A short one, yes." "I'll get my things," Sophia said, giving him another quick hug before leaving them alone. Ms. Abernathy didn't waste time. "I have a proposition for you. I have a student, an adult who started lessons late in life. Quite wealthy. He's looking for additional practice sessions. Someone to guide him through more advanced pieces." Miguel frowned, confused. "You want me to clean his house?" "No," she said firmly. "I want you to teach him piano. Sophia mentioned you've been helping at the community center occasionally. $200 per 2-hour session twice a week." Miguel stared at her, the numbers immediately multiplying in his head. "That's very generous." "It's the standard rate for someone of your background," she replied. "Sophia's told me enough about your training. I looked you up, Miguel Reyes. You studied under Maestro Cardenas. You were a finalist in the international piano competition in your 20s. He shifted uncomfortably. "That was long ago. Talent doesn't disappear," Ms. Abernathy said. "It just waits for its moment. This could help with Sophia's tuition, couldn't it?" The mention of tuition made him focus. "Yes, it would help very much. But my English, music is its own language," she interrupted. "And your English is perfectly fine. Will you at least meet him? His name is Richard Torres. He's a cardiologist with more money than time, but he's serious about learning." Miguel hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I will meet him." "Wonderful. I'll arrange it for next week." She handed him a card. "My number. Call me if anything changes." When Sophia returned, Miguel was still staring at the small white card in his hand. "What was that about?" she asked. "A possible opportunity," he said, tucking the card carefully into his wallet. "I'll tell you more later. I have to get back now." That night, after his late shift ended, Miguel didn't go straight home. Instead, he took the bus to the community center. Hector was used to his late visits and let him in without comment. The building was empty and dark except for the security lights. Miguel made his way to the practice room where the old Steinway waited. He hadn't come to practice with Sophia tonight. He needed to play alone, to see if what Ms. Abernathy suggested was even possible. He sat at the piano, staring at the keys. His hands, rough from years of cleaning, hovered uncertainly. Then, slowly, he began to play the same Rachmaninoff piece Sophia had performed hours earlier. The first few measures were stiff, his fingers finding the muscle memory but lacking fluidity. But gradually, as the music progressed, something awakened in him. Passages he thought he'd forgotten came back. Emotional nuances he hadn't accessed in years surfaced naturally. By the time he reached the climax of the movement, he was playing not just with technical accuracy but with heart, the way he once had, the way Sophia did. When he finished, the final notes hanging in the empty room, Miguel sat in silence, His hands were trembling slightly, but not from strain, from recognition. The musician was still inside him, buried but not gone. For the first time since reading Sophia's acceptance letter, he felt a glimmer of hope. If he could teach piano again, if he could reconnect with the part of himself he'd set aside, perhaps he could help make his daughter's dreams possible. Miguel gently closed the lid over the keys and stood up. As he walked through the darkened community center, his posture was a little straighter, his step a little lighter. Tomorrow he would still push his cleaning cart through Westfield Plaza. He would still be invisible to most of the executives whose offices he maintained. But now he carried a secret, like a small flame cupped in his hands, the knowledge that he was more than what they saw, that the music had never left him, that he might have found a way to bridge the gap between Sophia's talent and her future. The Westfield corporate plaza hummed with unusual activity as Miguel pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor. Administrative assistants hurried between offices, their arms full of binders and sample decorations. In the main conference room, a team was setting up a presentation about the upcoming 20th anniversary gala. Miguel worked around them quietly, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces while remaining as unobtrusive as possible. After 15 years of cleaning these offices, he had perfected the art of being present without being noticed. "No, that won't work," a sharp voice came from inside the conference room. The pianist canceled. "We need to find a replacement immediately." Miguel slowed his movements, his ears perking up at the mention of a pianist. "It's Thursday afternoon," another voice responded, sounding stressed. "The gala is tomorrow night. Where am I supposed to find a professional pianist with less than 36 hours' notice?" "That's your problem to solve, Vanessa. This is the CEO's pet project. Catherine wants everything perfect for the 20th anniversary." Miguel continued cleaning but moved closer to the conference room door, his curiosity piqued. He'd been giving piano lessons to Dr. Torres twice a week for the past month, earning extra money that went straight into Sophia's tuition fund. The work had awakened something in him, a connection to music he thought he'd lost forever. Inside the conference room, a woman with short blonde hair, Vanessa, he presumed, was furiously tapping at her phone.
"I've called every event planning agency in the city."
"Everyone's booked. What about that jazz quartet from last year's holiday party?" someone suggested. "Too casual," Vanessa replied without looking up. Catherine specifically wanted classical piano for the cocktail hour and dinner. Something elegant but not stuffy. Miguel finished wiping down the water cooler and moved on to the next office, his mind racing. He could play. He could do exactly what they needed. But the thought of offering his services made his stomach knot with anxiety. These people saw him only as the man who emptied their trash. Would they laugh? Would he lose his job for overstepping? Yet as he continued his cleaning rounds, the idea wouldn't leave him. The pay would likely be substantial. Event musicians at corporate functions earned in one night what might take him weeks to make. Money that could go toward Sophia's tuition. By the time Miguel reached the executive break room, his heart was pounding. Vanessa was there, pouring coffee with one hand while still clutching her phone in the other, looking increasingly frazzled. "Excuse me," Miguel said softly, clutching his cleaning cloth. "I couldn't help overhearing about your pianist problem." Vanessa glanced up, seeming surprised that the janitor was speaking to her. "Yes, Miguel took a deep breath. "I play piano. Classical piano." She stared at him for a moment, then let out a small laugh. "You're kidding, right?" "No, ma'am." Miguel straightened his shoulders slightly. "I studied at the National Conservatory in Mexico City. I could play for your event if you need someone." Vanessa's expression shifted from amusement to confusion to desperate hope in the span of seconds. "You're serious? You actually play? Like Beethoven and Mozart, not just, I don't know, chopsticks?" "Yes, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Rachmaninoff." Miguel trailed off, seeing the skepticism return to her face. "Look, Miguel." "Miguel Reyes, Miguel." "That's very interesting. But this is a high-profile corporate event with the CEO and board members and major clients attending." At that moment, two junior executives walked into the break room, catching the tail end of the conversation. "Wait, is the janitor offering to play piano at the gala?" one of them asked, not bothering to lower his voice. "That's hilarious," the other executive chuckled. "What's next? Is the parking attendant going to perform magic tricks?" Miguel felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He took a step back, regretting his decision to speak up. I am sorry to have bothered you. Please forget I mentioned it. Hold on, Vanessa said, raising a hand. She looked desperate enough to consider any option. Do you have any videos of you playing? Any way to prove you can actually do this? Miguel shook his head. No videos. But I could audition if you want. The junior executives were still watching with amused expressions, clearly enjoying the awkward exchange. Vanessa checked her watch and sighed heavily. Fine. There's a piano in the reception area on the ground floor. It's mainly for show, but it should work. Can you meet me there in 15 minutes? Yes, Miguel said, relief and nervousness flooding through him in equal measure. Thank you for the opportunity. As he wheeled his cart back to the service elevator, he could hear the executives laughing behind him. His hands trembled slightly as he pushed the button for the ground floor. What was he doing? He hadn't performed in public for almost 20 years, and now he was offering to play at a corporate gala for people who saw him as nothing more than the invisible man who cleaned their offices. But then he thought of Sophia, of the excitement in her eyes when she talked about Juilliard, of the stack of bills sitting on his kitchen table. He straightened his back and steadied his hands. He could do this. He had to do this. When Miguel arrived at the reception area, Vanessa was already there, looking at her watch impatiently. The grand piano stood in the corner of the lobby, its black surface gleaming under the soft lighting. It was far nicer than the old Steinway at the community center, probably worth more than Miguel made in several years. We don't have much time, Vanessa said briskly. What can you play without sheet music? Miguel approached the piano with reverence, running his fingertips lightly across its polished surface. Almost anything from the standard classical repertoire. What would you prefer? Vanessa looked surprised by his confident answer. Something that would impress Catherine Wells. Something elegant but with some emotion to it. Miguel nodded, settling onto the bench and adjusting its height. He flexed his fingers, noting how rough and calloused they looked against the pristine white keys. Then, without further hesitation, he began to play. He chose Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece Sophia had performed at her recital, the piece that connected him to Rosa, to his past, to all the dreams he'd set aside. His fingers moved across the keys with growing confidence, finding their old strength and agility. The melody filled the lobby, rich and complex, building from its melancholy opening to its triumphant middle section. Miguel closed his eyes, letting muscle memory and emotion guide him. He forgot about Vanessa watching, forgot about the executives who had laughed, forgot about his janitor's uniform and his calloused hands. For those minutes, he was simply a musician again, telling his story through Rachmaninoff's notes. When he finished the first movement and lifted his hands from the keys, the lobby had grown surprisingly crowded. Several employees had stopped to listen, including some from the executive floor. Even the security guard had abandoned his post at the front desk to move closer to the piano. Vanessa stood completely still, her phone forgotten in her hand, her mouth slightly open in astonishment. That was, she began, then seemed to run out of words. You really can play. Miguel nodded, suddenly self-conscious again as he became aware of all the eyes on him. He stood up from the bench, smoothing down his uniform shirt. Will that be suitable for your event? Suitable? Vanessa let out a small, incredulous laugh. That was incredible. How does no one know you can do this? Miguel shrugged. No one ever asked. The simple truth of his statement seemed to land heavily in the room. A few of the watching employees shifted uncomfortably, perhaps realizing how little attention they paid to the people who maintained their building. The gala starts at 7 p.m. tomorrow, Vanessa said, her professional demeanor returning. We need you from 7 to 9 for cocktails and dinner with short breaks. We'll pay the standard rate for event musicians plus a late booking fee. Is $800 acceptable? Miguel's heart leapt at the figure. Nearly 2 weeks' salary for one evening's work. Yes, that is very acceptable. Thank you. I'll need you in formal attire. Black suit, white shirt, black tie. Miguel's excitement dimmed slightly. He didn't own a suit, let alone formal wear. I will find something appropriate. See that you do, Vanessa said, already typing furiously on her phone. And please practice whatever you plan to play tomorrow. This event is extremely important. I understand, Miguel assured her. I won't let you down. As the crowd dispersed and Miguel returned to his cleaning cart, he noticed that people were looking at him differently, with curiosity and surprise rather than the usual indifference. Word would spread quickly through the building that the janitor was going to play piano at the gala. Some would be skeptical, others amused by the novelty. But Miguel didn't care what they thought. All that mattered was the money, what it would mean for Sophia's future, and the unexpected joy of returning to the piano in a meaningful way. That evening, when his shift ended, he didn't go straight home. Instead, he walked 3 blocks to a second-hand store he'd passed many times but never entered. The elderly shop owner looked up as the bell above the door jingled. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "Yes," Miguel replied with determination. "I need a suit. Something formal for a special performance." The woman smiled, coming around the counter. "A performance, is it? Well, let's see what we can find for you. What's the occasion, if you don't mind me asking?" As Miguel explained about the corporate gala, leaving out the part about being the company janitor, a strange sense of anticipation built within him. Tomorrow night, for the first time in many years, people would see him, really see him, as more than just the man who emptied their trash. They would see the musician he had once been, the musician he still was beneath the janitor's uniform, and perhaps most importantly, Sophia would have a better chance at the future she deserved. The grand ballroom of the Westfield Hotel sparkled with elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables draped in cream-colored linens and adorned with arrangements of white roses and greenery. The room buzzed with the voices of Westfield Corporate Plaza's executives, board members, and important clients, all dressed in their finest attire to celebrate the company's 20th anniversary. In a small dressing room near the service entrance, Miguel stood before a mirror, barely recognizing himself. The second-hand suit fit surprisingly well after some quick alterations by Mrs. Alvarez next door, who had hemmed the pants and taken in the jacket slightly. The white shirt was crisp, the black tie perfectly straight. He had splurged on a haircut that morning, and his usually work-worn hands were scrubbed clean, nails neatly trimmed. Miguel took a deep breath, fighting the butterflies in his stomach. It had been so long since he'd performed for an audience, nearly 20 years. Back then, he'd been a promising young pianist with dreams of concert halls and recording contracts. Now he was a janitor about to play for the very people who rarely noticed him as he cleaned their offices. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. 5 minutes. "Mr. Reyes," called a staff member. "Thank you," Miguel replied, his voice steadier than he felt. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small photo he always carried, Sophia and Rosa at the beach, taken just months before Rosa's diagnosis. He touched their faces gently, drawing strength from their smiles. "Watch over me tonight," he whispered. With one last glance in the mirror, Miguel left the dressing room and made his way through the service corridor to the ballroom. He paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. Near the far wall stood a magnificent grand piano, positioned to be visible throughout the room but not intrusive. Vanessa had arranged for it to be brought in specifically for tonight's performance, a Steinway concert grand that probably cost more than Miguel would earn in 10 years. Vanessa spotted him and hurried over, clipboard in hand and Bluetooth earpiece firmly in place. She looked him up and down with approval. "You clean up nicely," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "The CEO and board members are just being seated for dinner. You'll begin in about 3 minutes. Remember, start with something soft while people are still settling in. Then you can move to more complex pieces." Miguel nodded, suddenly too nervous to speak. As Vanessa rushed off to handle some other crisis, he made his way to the piano, feeling oddly exposed. A few heads turned as he walked past, curious glances from people who were used to seeing him in a very different context. He heard whispers as he passed. "Isn't that the janitor? You're kidding, that's the entertainment? This should be interesting." Miguel kept his eyes forward, focusing only on the piano ahead. When he finally reached it, he ran his fingertips lightly over the polished surface before taking his seat and adjusting the bench. The instrument was exquisite, far superior to the community center's old Steinway, or even the decent upright he and Sophia practiced on at home. As he settled his hands on the keys, the room continued to buzz with conversation. No one was really paying attention yet, which calmed his nerves slightly. He began with Debussy's Clair de Lune, gentle, flowing, and perfect for background music. The familiar notes helped steady his hands as he reacquainted himself with the piano's touch. It responded beautifully to even his lightest movements, the tone rich and resonant. As he played, Miguel gradually relaxed, letting the music flow through him. By the time he finished the Debussy piece and transitioned into a Chopin nocturne, he noticed that the room had grown quieter. More people were glancing his way, their conversations pausing as they realized that the background music was something special. He continued with selections from his carefully planned program, moving from gentler pieces to more complex compositions as the dinner progressed. With each new piece, his confidence grew. His fingers remembered their old strength and agility, finding the nuances and emotional depths that had once made his teachers believe he was destined for greatness. During a brief pause between pieces, Miguel scanned the room and noticed a woman at the central table watching him intently. From Vanessa's nervous hovering nearby, he guessed this must be Catherine Wells, the CEO. Unlike many others in the room, she didn't seem surprised or amused by his presence, just deeply attentive to the music. As the dinner plates were cleared and coffee was served, Miguel knew it was time for his final piece, the one he had practiced most carefully. Taking a deep breath, he began the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The piece started softly, those famous dark chords building gradually in intensity. Miguel poured everything into his playing, all the years of working in silence, all the sacrifices for Sophia, all the dreams he had set aside. His hands moved with confidence and passion across the keys, creating a story without words. The conversation in the room died completely. Forks were set down, coffee cups hovered mid-air. All eyes turned to the pianist in the corner, the man they'd passed in hallways for years without really seeing. As the piece built to its emotional peak, Miguel closed his eyes, letting the music carry him. He was dimly aware that people had stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped doing anything but listening. When he reached the triumphant middle section, where the melody transforms from something melancholy to something hopeful, he felt rather than saw someone move closer to the piano. Opening his eyes briefly, he was startled to find Catherine Wells standing just a few feet away. Watching his hands with an expression of absolute wonder, there was something else on her face too, something that looked remarkably like tears. Miguel didn't falter, continuing to play as the CEO of Westfield Corporation stood transfixed by his performance. As he approached the powerful conclusion of the movement, he noticed that she was not the only one affected. Throughout the ballroom, people were watching with expressions ranging from surprise to awe to emotional distress. When the final notes resonated through the room and Miguel lifted his hands from the keys, there was a moment of complete silence, that precious second when great music has just ended and no one wants to break the spell. Then, starting with Catherine Wells herself, the room erupted into applause. It grew louder as people rose to their feet, a standing ovation that seemed to wash over Miguel in waves. The sound was deafening, the energy electric. Miguel stood and bowed deeply, his heart pounding with emotion. As he straightened, he saw Catherine Wells wipe a tear from her cheek before stepping forward to shake his hand. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice carrying over the continued applause. "Truly extraordinary. What's your name?" "Miguel Reyes, ma'am." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You work at our building, don't you?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm on the night cleaning staff." 15 years now." Catherine shook her head slightly as if trying to reconcile the man before her with the invisible person who had cleaned her office for years. "And where did you learn to play like that, Mr. Reyes?" "The National Conservatory in Mexico City," he replied. "Many years ago." "Well," she said, still holding his hand, "it seems we've had a hidden treasure right under our noses all this time." More people were gathering around the piano now. Executives and board members who had never given Miguel a second glance, suddenly eager to meet him. They asked about his training, his background, how someone with his talent ended up cleaning offices for a living. Miguel answered politely but without elaboration. He didn't tell them about Rosa's illness, about the medical bills that had drained their savings, about choosing his family over his career. He didn't need their pity or their judgment. As the crowd around him grew, Miguel noticed Vanessa frantically signaling from the edge of the group. He excused himself and made his way to her. "That was incredible," she said, sounding genuinely impressed. "Everyone's talking about it. Catherine wants you to play again during the dessert course if you're willing. She's offering an additional $500. Miguel's heart leapt at the figure. Yes, of course, perfect. Take 15 minutes, then back to the piano. As Miguel headed toward the service area for a brief rest, he heard his name called. Turning, he saw one of the junior executives who had laughed at him yesterday approaching with an embarrassed expression. Mr. Reyes, I owe you an apology, the young man said, extending his hand. What I said yesterday was completely out of line. I had no idea. Miguel accepted the handshake with a small nod. It's forgotten. No, it shouldn't be, the executive insisted. I made assumptions. I was wrong. Your playing was... It made me cry, honestly. I've never heard anything like it. Thank you, Miguel said simply, touched by the sincere apology. In the quiet of the service corridor, Miguel took a moment to collect himself. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. How's it going? Tell me everything. He smiled, typing back, going well. We'll tell you everything later. Love you. As he slipped the phone back into his pocket, Miguel realized that something fundamental had shifted tonight. For years he had been invisible to these people, just part of the background of their workdays. Now they had truly seen him for the first time, not just as the janitor, but as a person with depth, with talent, with a story. The music had bridged worlds that rarely connected, bringing together people who occupied the same building but lived in different universes. And perhaps most importantly, it had reminded Miguel himself of who he was beyond his job, beyond his struggles. As he returned to the ballroom for his encore performance, Miguel walked taller, his steps confident. The crowd parted for him, faces now regarding him with respect and anticipation rather than surprise or condescension. The piano waited for him, gleaming under the chandeliers, keys ready for his touch. Miguel sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys, ready to tell his story once more. The Sunday morning after the gala, Miguel sat at his small kitchen table, still trying to process everything that had happened. His second-hand suit hung neatly by the door, a visible reminder that Friday night hadn't been a dream. On the table before him lay an envelope containing $300 in cash, his payment for the performance, including the generous bonus Catherine Wells had insisted on adding after his encore. Sophia bustled around the kitchen, making coffee and repeatedly asking for more details about the night. He had already told her the story twice since coming home late Friday, but she was hungry for every scrap of information, every reaction, every moment. And the CEO really cried? She asked again, setting a steaming mug in front of him. Yes, Miguel confirmed, smiling at her enthusiasm. Not sobbing, you understand, just... He gestured to his own cheek. Oh, tears here. When I played the Rachmaninoff. Sophia sat across from him, her eyes bright with excitement. The same piece I played at my recital. Mom's favorite. Yes. Miguel wrapped his hands around the warm mug. It felt right somehow. Like she was there with me. Sophia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. She was, Dad, she always is. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of Rosa. So what happens now? Sophia finally asked. Miguel shrugged. I go back to work tomorrow night. Clean the offices, empty the trash. But everything's different now, Sophia insisted. They know who you really are. They've seen what you can do. Perhaps, Miguel said cautiously. But one night of applause doesn't change the world, mi tesoro. I still need my job. We still need to figure out how to pay for Juilliard. Sophia's expression grew serious. Did you tell anyone about me? About my scholarship? No, Miguel admitted. It didn't seem the right time. The buzzing of Miguel's phone interrupted their conversation. He frowned, not recognizing the number on the screen. Hello? Mr. Reyes? This is Catherine Wells from Westfield Corporation. Miguel sat up straighter, his eyes widening as he mouthed, the CEO, to Sophia, who immediately leaned closer to try to hear. Yes, Ms. Wells, good morning. I hope I'm not disturbing your Sunday, she said. I've been thinking about your performance Friday night. It was truly exceptional. Thank you, Miguel replied, still surprised to be receiving a personal call from the head of Westfield. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to come to my office tomorrow. Around noon? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Miguel's stomach tightened with sudden anxiety. Was there a problem? Had someone complained about the janitor stepping out of his place? Of course, he said, trying to keep his voice even. I'll be there. Wonderful. My assistant will meet you in the lobby. And Mr. Reyes? Thank you again for sharing your gift with us on Friday. It was the highlight of the evening. After they hung up, Sophia peppered him with questions he couldn't answer. What did the CEO want? Was she offering him a different job? Was she going to sponsor a concert? I don't know, Miguel kept saying, trying to temper both her excitement and his own nerves. We will find out tomorrow. That night he barely slept, his mind spinning with possibilities. By the time he arrived at Westfield Plaza the next day, dressed in his best non-work clothes, pressed khakis and a button-down shirt, his nerves were stretched tight as piano wire. In the lobby, a young woman approached him immediately. Mr. Reyes? I'm Lisa, Ms. Wells's assistant. She's ready for you now. As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Miguel tried to calm his racing heart. He had cleaned the executive offices countless times, but had never been invited to one as a guest. Lisa led him through the executive suite to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Catherine Wells rose from behind an imposing desk as they entered. Mr. Reyes, thank you for coming. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Please have a seat. Once Lisa had left, closing the door behind her, Catherine settled back into her chair and regarded Miguel thoughtfully. I've worked in this building for 8 years, she began. And I've seen you cleaning these offices many times. Yet until Friday night, I had no idea who you really were. Miguel shifted uncomfortably under her direct gaze. I am who I've always been, Ms. Wells. She nodded, acknowledging the gentle correction. Yes, I suppose that's true. We were the ones who failed to see. She leaned forward slightly. May I ask why you never mentioned your musical background? Your talent? Miguel considered his answer carefully. No one ever asked, he said finally, echoing his words to Vanessa before the gala. And I needed the job more than I needed people to know I once played piano. Once played? Catherine raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reyes, what you did Friday night was not the work of someone who once played. That was the performance of a master. Miguel felt his face warm at the praise. Thank you. But it has been many years since I played regularly. Yet you've clearly kept your skills sharp, she observed. May I ask why you stopped performing professionally? With your talent, you could have had quite a career. For a moment, Miguel considered giving a simplified answer, but something in her genuine interest made him decide to tell the truth. My wife was also a pianist, he began quietly. Very talented. We met at the conservatory in Mexico City. After we married, we moved to the United States for better opportunities. Then our daughter was born, and Rosa, my wife, stayed home with her while I played at hotels. Restaurants gave lessons, he paused. The old grief still a dull ache after all these years. When Sophia was 9, Rosa was diagnosed with cancer. She needed treatments, care. I took whatever work I could find. Steady work with health insurance. The music, it had to wait. Catherine's expression had softened as he spoke. I'm very sorry for your loss. And your daughter, Sophia? Miguel's face brightened instantly at the mention of his daughter. She is wonderful. 18 now and a pianist like her mother. Better than I ever was, even at my best. That must make you very proud. It does. Miguel hesitated, then decided to continue. She was recently accepted to Juilliard. With a partial scholarship. Catherine's eyes widened with understanding. And that's why you took the gala job. For the money. Yes, Miguel admitted. The remaining tuition. It is a lot for us. Catherine nodded thoughtfully, then reached for a folder on her desk. Well, Mr. Reyes, that brings me to why I asked you here today. After your performance Friday night, several board members approached me. They were as moved as I was, and they had an idea I fully support. She opened the folder and slid a document across the desk to him. Westfield Corporation would like to establish a music education fund, a scholarship program for talented young musicians who lack financial resources. And we would like to name your daughter as its first recipient. Miguel stared at the document, certain he must have misunderstood. I'm sorry? A full scholarship, Catherine clarified, covering all expenses not included in her partial scholarship to Juilliard. Tuition, housing, books, even a small stipend for living expenses. Miguel's vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. He tried to speak but found he couldn't form words. Additionally, Catherine continued gently, we would like to offer you a new position here at Westfield. You would continue your current J,